Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Venus conjoining the south node of the moon in the sign of Libra. We're going to talk about why it's significant, what to watch for, and also it's a very rare occurrence. And we're going to talk about why that is and what it means that it's such a rare astrological event. So anyway, that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections. Helps the channel to grow quite a bit when you guys do that. Transcripts of any of my daily talks, as always, can be found on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I want to give you guys an update on the Kickstarter. We're in our second week of the Kickstarter. So far, we have the support of 137 backers at the time that I am recording this, which means we have a long ways left to go. We still need the support of 1,640 subscribers, audience members out there like yourself to pitch in and support us in this channel in the year ahead. Remember, when you pitch in, that you are supporting a couple of really amazing things. One is that because we offer all of our classes and class bundles as rewards greatly discounted through the Kickstarter every year, the success of the Kickstarter fuels the ability that we have as a school to offer need-based tuition and flexible pricing. 60% of our students are able to come and pay whatever they can do that's not going to harm them or their budget because of their financial situation, because the Kickstarter does well. It's a huge reason why we're able to do need-based tuition and flexible pricing. So when you support the Kickstarter, you're supporting the ability of people from a lot of diverse backgrounds to be able to study and immerse themselves in the spiritual language of astrology. Two, there's a whole staff of people that goes into creating and sustaining the work of this channel 5 days a week, year round. 3 to 4 hours every day is my own process. And then we hand it over to a team of people that help edit it, put it into place, distribute it, manage the comment section, weed out people who are trying to impersonate me, or, like all sorts of stuff that happens throughout the year. So anyway, when you support the Kickstarter, you're supporting a staff and their livelihood. And of course, this is part of how I earn my living. So if you appreciate the channel, if you appreciate the work, it only takes a small percentage of the nearly 60,000 subscribers on this channel to pitch in and support myself, my staff, the good visions that I feel like we have in our programming. We really do appreciate it when you take a moment to go over to the Kickstarter and pick up a reward and pitch in and help us meet our goal. You can find the link in the description of this video or the comments section pinned to the top. When you go over there, remember that we have a bunch of different rewards that are really great. You can pick up our Astrology of 2024 video that Alex and I made, which is where we look at all the major transits of the year ahead in a special video. It doesn't get published anywhere else. There's a year ahead horoscope reading. Alex and I did one video per sun or rising sign, looking at all of your major transits for the year ahead. It's a big horoscope that we don't release anywhere else. You can find my new book, The Oracle Speaks, if you want to get the audiobook version or the text as it's coming out chapter by chapter in the year ahead. And then all of our classes are massively discounted. So you can pick up any of my classes for 50% off. And then if you bundle 2, 3, 4 of our 6 different programs, the savings goes up. The 4-class pass, our 10th anniversary special, puts the classes down to almost 75% off the normal rate. So it's a huge discount. We only do it once a year, and we do it specifically because it supports the channel, it supports everything we do, and the success of the Kickstarter really sustains all of our long-term goals and projects. It's always a leap of faith to do this, and I appreciate you guys listening to me bang the drum at the beginning of every episode. I make a new intro video every day at this time of year and pin it on so I can keep my finger on the pulse, give you guys updated numbers. So you'll notice that in the video today, I'm wearing a different outfit. That's because the actual content I recorded a couple of days ago, and I'm giving you the updated numbers this morning with a kind of edited on intro. I'll be doing that daily. And I also go on live. So, when you click subscribe, click on notifications, because sometimes I go live and I do live readings as a way of banging the drum and help try to stir up support for the Kickstarter as well. Anyway, we deeply appreciate all of you. We hope you'll take a moment to consider supporting us, and I hope you guys will enjoy today's video on Venus in the South Node. Okay, well, on that note, I want to talk today about why this South Node Venus conjunction is such a big deal. Now, again, I think probably a lot of people will, I don't think people are sleeping on this one. It's like, well, a lot of people probably know that anytime a planet conjoins one of the nodes, it can be quite strong. So it's not like I think people are just like ignorant about this, but there are some things that make it really unique. For example, actually, let me just put this up again. Sorry, I need to be able to use my pen. So, oops, here we go. No, it's not letting me use my pen. So frustrating. Well, you can see it right there. I have isolated it so you can see it. This is November 28th. That is tomorrow that this transit is coming through. One of the reasons that this is a big deal is that Venus is the ruler of the South Node. And when the ruler of one of the nodes comes around and conjoins the node, it is especially powerful, especially important. Why, you might ask? There's some really interesting reasons for that. And we'll use Libra as our example today, since that's where it is. I want to read you now something that comes from an Indian astrologer, Vedic, Jyotish, different names for the same thing. And this is what he says about Rahu and Ketu. And it's really important because the traditional or ancient approach to the nodes of the moon is not exactly the same as the modern evolutionary approach. But if you're into the modern evolutionary approach, you know that within the evolutionary school of astrology, it's also a big deal when a planet comes around and conjoins the node. Ruler of the North Node with the North Node, ruler of the South Node with the South Node. That's a big deal in evolutionary astrology as well. But from the ancient perspective, listen to what this astrologer says. This comes from an Vedic astrology blog. Though Rahu and Ketu, that's the north and south, Rahu being the north, Ketu being the south, are considered one entity, we'll take them as different parts. Let us first talk about Rahu. Rahu is associated with the tamasic infatuation of a human being. That's like the desire body. It is associated with materialistic pleasure and worldly desire. It makes the soul surrender to materialization. It is often called the karak of fame, greed, obsession, manipulation, disease, and inertia. Rahu belongs to the Vata nature. This is talking about Ayurveda now, but a person influenced by Rahu may be an outcast, have harsh speech, be engrossed in lies, treachery, goes on and on. However, they are very powerful. If it's considered very powerful, it has the capacity of turning friends into enemies and vice versa. Buddhist culture, Rahu is considered as one of the crow devatas that terrifies the native. It's considered malefic in Indian astrology. Rahu, if acting in a powerful way, may grant benefit to politicians, people seeking fame and people seeking the realization of their desires. So Rahu will often grant people a very strong realization or realization of their desires. However, what comes with that is a problematic inability to feel satiated. In the story, Rahu Ketu are one demon, and the head is severed from the neck, just as the demon is trying to drink the nectar of immortality sort of illegally. And so he gets his head cut off by an incarnation of Mohini Murti, which is an incarnation of Vishnu, takes the Sudarshan chakra, cuts off his head, and the Sudarshan chakra is the weapon of time, by the way, cuts off his head, the nectar gets stuck in his throat. You could say that Rahu is this part of us in our charts that talks about where our desires are, where they lie, and also the inability to ever feel totally satiated by the realization of those desires. For example, Rahu in the seventh, broadly speaking, might mean the desire for spouse, love, sex, marriage, relationship, but the inability to feel satiated from those very things, even if you do realize them. Nonetheless, we can learn and grow quite a bit from our desires, especially when we realize that they give us something, but not everything. Now, by contrast, Ketu. If Rahu is considered the planet of worldly desires, then Ketu can be related to spirituality. It represents the spiritual process of evolution and the refinement of materialization to spirit. Ketu is a worldly malefic, but spiritually benefic. Ketu is the karaks of spiritualism, wisdom, fantasy, invincibility, and psychic abilities. Ketu belongs to the Pitta element. Ketu generally matures at the age of 48 when the soul starts to turn towards salvation. Now, that's according to the sort of the vision of the stages of life through Indian philosophy, of course. But the point being that the south node of the moon is something that is frequently absorbing material experiences and crystallizing them, turning them, refining them into spiritual insight. And as such, the South Node tends to not be great for worldly things, but is great for spiritual realization, taking wisdom, taking experience and turning it into spiritual insight. So now you understand, maybe you're starting to understand why the South Node with its ruler, Venus, is a big deal. Let's say that Libra, broadly speaking, as the exaltation of Saturn and the masculine domicile of Venus, represents social ideals, the way your relationship should go ideally, the way friendships should go in your life ideally, the way your social life should run and what it should look like and how refined it should be and how pleasing it should be ideally. It also has to do with the refined sense of taste, pleasure, aesthetic that we develop. That's almost like the architecture of pleasure. You can think of Libra as something like a kind of Platonic architectural design that we have in our mind somewhere as to what pleasure should look like or should feel like. There's a lot of shoulds there in that Saturn's piece in Libra, perhaps, but Libra is also, broadly speaking, many people conflate it with the seventh house in modern astrology, and it is not to be conflated with the seventh house from the traditional point of view. But either way, you could think of this placement. Let me turn this off now so I can just talk to you guys. Hi. So you could think of this placement as when the South Node comes through Libra, we are ready to take all sorts of experiences in this Libran realm or through the Libran archetype and refine them into spiritual insight. The Libran South Node stuff will diminish worldly things in a way and emphasize otherworldly things, but it will often do so in a way that has to do with ideals of beauty, pleasure. For example, the South Node in Libra is something that can be great when someone is considering turning away from problematic elements in their problematic elements related to your desires and pleasure that keep you from some higher, more transcendental state of peace and happiness. That's a great South Node in Libra teaching is like, oh, well, maybe there's too many processed foods in your diet, or I don't know, I'm just making this up, but like maybe there's something about the way you seek out pleasure that's keeping you from achieving some kind of like very idealistic Libran high vision of like pleasure and temperance and beauty. And so, there will be almost like an austerity or an asceticism or a renunciation or a backing away from the problematic elements of the physical world that aren't allowing you to reach some higher plane of Libran beauty or equanimity or peace or whatever. And that's kind of a nice part of having the South Node in the sign of Libra. You could also think about the South Node in Libra as maybe like within our relationships, where are we uncompromising, overly idealistic, and as rigid as a set of architectural blueprints? And so the South Node in Libra moving through will also show us, here's where you're too rigid in what you think pleasure, happiness, peace, relational harmony ought to look like. This is where you've been too strict. This is where you've been too, like inflexible, sort of. Remember, Saturn exalted in Libra. You've been too flexible about your vision of what relationships, inflexible and too rigid. And so you need to chill out, because the transcendental, otherworldly, spiritual value of love and connection is more important than these pristine, plans of perfection that are actually making your life more, you're sort of white knuckling it too much because of them. These are South Node in Libra potential lessons that can come up with South Node in Libra. You could see the South Node in Libra as helping us refine elements of our life that help us reach a higher ideal of happiness or harmony. You could, especially in relationships and with regard to pleasure and happiness. But then you could also think about the South Node in Libra as showing us where there's some kind of unrealistic, rigid idealism that's keeping us from experiencing something of a mature love and flow and harmony, right? Because there's rigidity in Libra as well. You could also think about any kind of refinement of artistic understanding, a refinement of your way of doing or being in relationships that have come through spiritual insight. what's worked and what hasn't. Those are Venusian qualities that are maybe there's a refinement or a maturity happening. So think about the spiritualization taking place in and through the sign of Libra when it comes to relationships. These are all things that happen when the Venus South Node conjunction comes through, when the South Node comes through Libra. But what makes it extra special, and we have to think about now, is what does it mean when the ruler comes in? When the ruler comes in, it's like, so we take our kids every fall to this apple orchard in Minnesota, kind of outside of the Twin Cities. And there's all of these apples that are like on the tree. And then there's lots that have already fallen on the ground. And it's amazing because they're like, some of them you barely even touch it and they just knock off because they're just ready to be picked. This Venus with the South Node is like beautiful fruit that is on the tree. There's the ruler Venus in her own sign with the South Node. This beautiful fruit is ready to be plucked. It's ready. You could pick, there's some on the ground already that maybe there's some that are rotting. You got to let go of those, can't touch those, but there's good fruit on the ground that's just fallen, and there's fruit on the tree. Fill your basket, go home and make an apple pie. Venus conjoining the South Node is about a moment of realized wisdom. Now, there could be, as Venus hits the South Node of the Moon, some sense of diminishment or loss or difficulty in terms of worldly things that Venus represents, and they're maybe temporarily being diminished or being curbed or diminished so that we can remember this kind of otherworldly spiritual value. For example, Venus on the South Node can come up when maybe you're ready to end a relationship and it's painful to do so, but you know exactly why you need to. And the need comes from the fact that you're ready to be with someone who has the similar spiritual values as yourself, perhaps. So Venus with the South Node can provide loss or difficulties when it comes to the attainment of various worldly things or desires, but usually it will come with a mature realization around Venusian things that actually enhance your life spiritually in the long run. At the exact same time, if you've done work, I don't want to make the material spiritual distinction too stronger than it is, because sometimes spiritual and material cross over. So it's not like nothing beautiful or brilliant or amazing fruit on the tree isn't going to be put in your basket and harvested that may not benefit your life both spiritually and materially. But the point is that sometimes Venus in the South Node will represent a kind of culminating wisdom, a fruit on the tree, a wisdom gained that also reflects some kind of loss or letting go or releasing or a diminishing of something that you were attached to in the worldly sense. But as you relinquish the attachment to something worldly, the fruit is of otherworldly value that is just tremendous. And with Venus, there's probably crossover. It might be about a refinement of desires, a refinement of taste, a refinement of relationships, so that higher spiritual insight is now guiding the relationship or the way you act or indulge or the way you pursue your desires more than it was in the past. But now, all of that makes it pretty special, but here's what makes it even more special. This does not happen all that often. Venus conjoining the South Node of the Moon when Venus is the ruler of the node in the sign of Libra, it's very rare. Let's go back in time. The last time that it happened was August 29th of 2005. You can go back to that time and see what was happening. Do you know what was happening in my life? This is the only one I could remember. I went back to the previous ones and I was too young. Couldn't remember anything. This was when I started writing my book. My book was I started writing it right after my first experiences with ayahuasca, which helped me to get sober from drug problems that I was having. So Venus conjoins the South Node of the Moon in late August, and I am moving on to campus in a master's degree that I was in. I was starting a teaching fellowship, and I was starting to write what would become my thesis, which was a travel log of a fictionalized travel log of my experiences with ayahuasca that would in turn set me on a path creatively that would turn into my book. Crystallized wisdom at that time it was very spiritual around pleasure, specifically the pleasure body and addiction, right? and then an artistic / spiritual expression of that newfound understanding that would crystallize in the form of a book, a piece of art. That's amazing. Like, that's just amazing. Go back to late August 2005, and look at what kinds of Venusian Libran insight from any area of your life. Look at the whole sign house of Libra in your birth chart and try to understand around that time. It doesn't have to be exactly on August 29th, but around that time, what kind of insight was crystallizing for you. What I find really interesting is that as that conjunction is coming back, I am in the very first chapters of a new book. That is the first book I've written since I started writing that one. That's amazing. That's fantastic. That's why it's rare too. Okay. Go back in time even further, September 18th, 1987, if you want to check that out. Now, I couldn't remember anything from that one myself. I was 6 years old at that time. August 30th of 1986, that was around the time that the South Node was also in Libra. And then you can go back even earlier to September 10th of 1968 and to December 3rd of 1967. Let me run through those once more all over again. August 29th, 2005, and thereabouts. Think about the month before, the month after. That's a good timeline to jar your memory if you need a little help. Number 2 is September 8th of 1987. 18th, I should say. Number 3 is August 30th of 1986. Number 4 is September 10th of 1968. And number 5 is December 3rd of 1967. As if that is not already enough to get excited about, the next one, we have one more, which will be September 4th of 2024. So we'll have one more version of this to come. Now, on my timeline, what's interesting is I should be finished with my book by that time. My goal is to have it finished by October of 2024. Isn't that cool? This is why I love astrology, you guys. I know that, like, I'm sure people who are listening to this who aren't as, they aren't as deeply steeped in this nerdy mystical tradition probably find this like, I don't know, what this guy's, like, what is this guy talking about? This joker with his little spiky hair and flannel shirt talking about 1987. But anyway, so I hope that you guys will be able to look back and find something. And if you can't, don't sweat it, but still look at what's happening this week, because it's really special. There's something very poignant about the ruler of the South Node, Venus, Libra, coming together, offering us this kind of crystallized, otherworldly Venusian Libran insight. Sometimes that means there's a releasing or a surrendering or some disappointment or even diminishment of various worldly desires. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, when I look back at that 2005 moment, I was having a really hard time in the first 3-4 months of being sober, of like adapting to all of that. And that period of time was rough for me in a few different ways, as I was learning to say no, learning to stay sober, looking for help to maintain that and to dig beneath the surface and so forth, which is something that people with addiction have to do, in my opinion. But I was also starting to write a book about the insights gained in this kind of otherworldly artistic project began. Here it is, and it's happening again. This time the book is about divination. So I think this is a really, really magical transit with a really interesting history. And I hope you're able to find something of value by looking back in time. But if not, just focus on what's happening right now this week and what's crystallizing. Look at the whole sign house of Libra in particular. All right. Anyway, that's it for today. Don't forget to hop on over to the Kickstarter. We're trying to get to 1,777 backers by the new year. We need your help to get there. Pick up a reward. We offer lots of really cool things to say thank you and give you something of value in exchange for supporting the channel, the school, all of the things we offer, all of the things we're building, myself and my staff. From all of us, we really appreciate you guys. And we'll talk again soon. Bye, everyone.